They were left to fade among mountains no one remembered. But what they discovered there would silence science itself and awaken something the world had forgotten: mercy in its purest form. The road to Elder's Reach curved through a wilderness of white. Wind screamed across the cliffs, scraping over half-buried road signs. The old pickup coughed its last protest beneath a corroded sign that read, "Elder's Reach, population, 0 Elias Moore." 72 turned the key once more, but the engine surrendered with a dry click. He exhaled, the sound half sigh, half apology. Beside him, Mae, wrapped in her wool shawl, adjusted the oxygen tube trailing from her nose. Her eyes followed the frozen pines. The silence pressed in like cold glass. In the back seat, Coda, their aging Alaskan shepherd, raised his head. His breath fogged the window in a slow rhythm, the only steady pulse left between them. Behind them, a sleek black SUV rolled to a stop. 3 figures emerged, their boots too clean for this place. Aaron, the eldest, straight-backed, carrying the posture of someone who manages people, not mountains. Lena, the lawyer, balanced a portfolio against her chest, eyes sharp and professional even here. Clara, the youngest, lingered near the car door, her guilt visible in the way she wouldn't meet her mother's eyes. Aaron's voice sliced through the wind. "You can't keep living beyond your means. Dad, it's not sustainable." Elias looked at him, at the coat that probably cost more than this truck, and said quietly, "You mean we're not sustainable?" Lena stepped forward, placing a manila folder on the hood. "We found the deed to an old mining cabin here. It's the only property still under the family name. It's practical. There's a small clinic in Pinecrest." "A nursing home," Elias interrupted. Mae's hand trembled on the armrest. "You mean to put us away?" Aaron's tone softened, rehearsed. "We're trying to help. You'll have care, security." "They don't allow pets," Mae whispered. Aaron hesitated. "Mom, it's a dog. It'll be fine." The words landed like stones. Coda stiffened, tail low but steady. Elias stepped closer to his son. "That dog sat outside your hospital room through 3 winters. He waited when no one else did. Don't call him just a dog again." The silence that followed was louder than the storm. Gravel crunched under Aaron's boots as he turned back toward the SUV. "We've done what we can. The cabin's yours now. At least it's something." Lena closed the portfolio. "You'll have peace there, away from the noise." Clara lingered, eyes red. She pressed a handkerchief into Mae's palm, a tiny square of softness between all the steel. "If you need me, I'll come back." Mae smiled faintly. "Come back when your heart is quiet." When the SUV disappeared beyond the ridge, the world swallowed its echo. Only wind remained, and the slow, rhythmic clicking of Coda's claws against ice. Elias opened the truck bed. A tarp, a few cans of food, a rusted stove, and 2 oxygen tanks. Their combined worth, $840, and whatever dignity could be carried in 2 aging bodies and a loyal heart. The cabin waited a mile up the ridge, skeletal and listing like a survivor too tired to fall. Its windows were shattered. Its porch sagged. Inside, mold clung to the beams. The air smelled of rust and resignation. On the far wall, carved into rotting wood, were faint initials. EM, 1932. Elias traced them with a gloved finger. "Someone in the family's been here before," he murmured. "Maybe the mountain remembers us." Mae sank into a broken chair, lungs crackling softly. "It's quiet here," she said, "but not empty. Quiet like a held breath." Coda padded in, nose twitching, circling the room with the precision of a scout. Then he stopped before the fireplace, or what was left of it, and pressed his paw to the ground. A deep, almost imperceptible hum seemed to rise through the floorboards, like the heartbeat of something buried alive. Elias frowned. "You feel that?" Mae nodded slowly. "The earth is warmer than the air." He knelt, touched the ground. Beneath the chill wood, a faint warmth pulsed steady as his wife's fragile breathing. "Could be a spring under us," he said. "Or maybe this mountain still has a pulse." That night, the storm grew teeth. The roof moaned under snow, each gust testing the cabin's will. Elias patched holes with scrap metal. Mae counted the seconds between her breaths. Coda stood guard near the door. Every few minutes, he lifted his head, ears flicking toward something beyond the walls. Elias watched him uneasy. The dog's eyes glowed in the lamplight. Not fear, not alertness, but recognition. As if he knew this place. At midnight, Mae whispered, "If this is where we end, it's at least ours." Elias took her hand. "No," he said. "It's where we begin again, with nothing but kindness left to spend." Outside, the wind paused just for a heartbeat. Coda raised his muzzle and exhaled into the silence. From somewhere deep under the frozen soil, a sound responded. Not a growl, not thunder, but a low sigh, ancient and alive. And for the first time that winter, Mae smiled. "The mountain," she said. "It's listening." The first night at Elder's Reach was a negotiation between fear and dignity. The wind clawed at the boards, whispering through the cracks like an old language no one should understand. The walls flexed, complaining softly, and somewhere outside, a shutter clanged like a warning bell. Elias lay half awake beside the dying fire, the orange glow painting slow circles on the ceiling. Each time Mae coughed, Coda stirred, pressing closer until her breathing settled again. The dog's warmth was steady, ancient, a wordless promise that someone still watched over them when the world no longer did. At dawn, the storm dissolved into fine snow. Through a jagged hole in the window, Elias saw a pale ribbon of light slide down the valley, touching the trees like cautious fingers. He rose quietly, fed the stove the last of the dry kindling, and struck a match. The flame hesitated, then bloomed, fragile but alive. For a moment, he just watched it. That small flicker was everything human. Stubborn, temporary, radiant, despite the odds. Mae stirred under the blanket, her voice a thin thread. "You got it burning," he smiled faintly. "Old habits. Machines or fire, they all just need patience." She nodded, adjusting her oxygen tube. "You'll need to make a list. Food, heat, water, pride. Which one runs out first?" Elias didn't answer. He knew she wasn't really asking. They took inventory anyway. Half a bag of flour, 3 tins of beans, 2 of corn, a rusted kettle, 1.5 tanks of oxygen. It wasn't survival. It was a question. How long can love substitute for air? Coda, usually calm, refused his breakfast. He stood by the back door, nose lifted toward the woods, tail low but firm. His ears flicked once, listening. Elias followed his gaze and saw nothing but fog rolling through the birch trees. Still, there was something odd about the air. It carried a faint scent, metallic, almost warm, impossible in this frozen stillness. Elias crouched beside the dog. "What do you smell, boy?" Coda's only answer was a low, throaty sound, not a growl, but something deeper, a tension made audible. Then he turned sharply and padded into the snow, disappearing behind the shed before Elias could stop him. Mae's voice came from the doorway. "Let him go. Dogs don't get lost where their hearts belong." Elias hesitated. The fog was thick, the kind he almost laughed, but didn't. There was something about the moment that forbade it. They decided to cover the spot, to protect it from the wind. Elias found an old sheet of tin and some stones, arranging them like a makeshift shrine. As he worked, he felt a strange calm settle over him, a sense of cooperation rather than intrusion. That night, the cabin felt less like a tomb and more like a waiting room for something unnamed. The wind softened, the timbers creaked with familiarity. Mae sat by the fire, reading from an old notebook she'd kept since her teaching days. "You know," she said, "I once told my students that life is just the earth recycling kindness. We give, it grows. We take, it withers. Maybe we just forgot to give for too long." Elias looked at her across the flickering light. "Maybe this place is giving back," she smiled, the lines at her eyes deepening. "Then the least we can do is say thank you." Outside, the fog lifted. Moonlight brushed across the clearing, touching the patch of earth where steam still whispered upward. Coda remained there, unmoving. Sentinel, believer, bridge. His eyes glinted gold under the moon, reflecting a warmth that didn't belong to the fire. Elias joined him, crouching beside the dog. Beneath the stones, the ground still pulsed, faint but rhythmic. He closed his eyes, listening. The sound wasn't a heartbeat exactly, more like water humming in pipes or wind traveling through roots. And yet, beneath that sound, there was intention. He rose slowly, brushing snow from his knees. Mae was watching from the doorway, her silhouette framed by the firelight behind her. "Well?" she asked. Elias met her gaze. "It's alive," he said simply. "Whatever's under there, it's alive." Mae stepped outside, barefoot despite the cold, and stood beside him. The air shimmered faintly around their breath. She reached down, placed her palm near the stones, and closed her eyes. Her voice, when it came, was a whisper more to herself than to him. "If the earth remembers how to heal, maybe we can too." Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. The mountain had spoken first. By morning, the snow had hardened to glass. The storm had passed, but the silence that followed felt heavier, as if the mountain itself was listening to its own breath. Elias woke first. The fire had died to ash, leaving a faint trace of smoke curling from the stovepipe. He pulled on his boots, each buckle echoing in the cabin's stillness, and found Coda already at the door, waiting. The dog's fur glowed faintly in the half-light, every breath rising like mist. When Elias opened the door, a curtain of fog drifted inside, soft, white, almost warm. Mae stirred behind him. "It's warmer today," she murmured. "Too warm for the season," he replied. Outside, the valley glimmered under a strange hue. The sky carried no sun yet, but the air shimmered, faintly alive. Snow hung in thin threads along the branches, melting from within. Elias walked toward the small mound of earth they'd covered the night before. The tin sheet lay crooked now, as if lifted from below. Coda trotted ahead, sniffed the edges, then pawed once at the snow. Cautious, but certain. Elias crouched and felt again the same pulse, slow, rhythmic, undeniable. Warmth seeped into his gloves, deep and steady. He peeled back the sheet, half expecting to see the glow of molten rock. Instead, there was movement. Not of fire, but of water. A thin vein of liquid pulsed beneath the surface, shimmering like mercury in the dim light. Steam rose in curls. Elias reached out, scraped away the frost until his fingertips found mud, wet, living mud, and a small trickle of water welling upward, whispering as it came. He looked up toward the cabin. Mae stood in the doorway, framed by the pale interior light, her shawl trailing in the wind. "It's not frozen," he called. "Not at all." She made her way down, careful and slow. Her breath came short, but there was determination in every step. When she knelt beside him, the steam reached her face and she closed her eyes as if recognizing an old friend. "It smells clean," she said softly. Elias nodded. "No sulfur, no iron, it's pure." Coda leaned forward and lapped at the trickle once, twice, then looked up as though awaiting permission. Mae's hand moved automatically to stroke his head. "He knows," she said. "Animals always know before we do." They built a shallow basin with stones, guiding the flow into a small pool. It gathered quickly, clear as glass, releasing warmth into the morning air. Elias dipped his fingers again. The water was neither hot nor cold, something in between, like the temperature of living skin. When he lifted his hand, the droplets shimmered silver in the light. Mae stared at them, mesmerized. "It feels like breath," she whispered. "It's just a spring," Elias said, though his voice betrayed doubt. "Groundwater trapped in a vent, maybe. The miners must have hit this decades ago. Then why's it still running after all these years?" she asked. He didn't answer. The question hung between them like mist. By afternoon, the fog thickened again, yet the air near the spring stayed calm and clear. Mae sat close to it, her oxygen tank beside her, the mask removed for the first time in days. She inhaled deeply, closing her eyes. Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment Elias saw the color return to her cheeks, a faint blush that hadn't been there in months. "You shouldn't," he began, but stopped when she smiled. "I'm breathing," she said. "Really breathing. It doesn't hurt." Coda wagged his tail once, curling up beside her as if keeping watch. Elias set about reinforcing the cabin, patching the roof with what metal sheets he could salvage. Between tasks, he kept glancing toward her, the slow rise and fall of her shoulders, the calmness on her face. It unnerved him as much as it soothed him. Later, as dusk fell, he joined her by the spring. The last light of day caught the steam, turning it into gold dust. Mae's hand rested in the water, the skin pale and wrinkled yet luminous. "Do you feel it?" she asked. He knelt beside her, placing his hand where hers had been. The warmth pressed against his palm like a heartbeat. He felt something unspoken there, not the chill of geology, not the comfort of faith, but an in-between truth neither could name. "It's alive," Mae said. "And it's kind." He looked at her. "You think kindness can come from stone?" "Maybe it always has," she said. "We just forgot how to listen." The night rose slowly, folding around them. When the stars appeared, they seemed to gather directly above the spring, as if drawn to it. Elias watched the reflection of starlight dance across the surface, trembling like thought itself. Coda lifted his head, ears twitching. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a faint groan rolled through the earth. Distant, but deliberate, like something shifting in its sleep. Elias met Mae's gaze. "Did you hear that?" She nodded, calm. The mountains not done speaking, they sat in silence, wrapped in the breath of the earth and their own fragile awe. Around them, the air held warmth where winter should have ruled. It was not a miracle. Later, when Mae dozed off, he stepped outside to check the spring. The snow reflected starlight, turning the clearing into a field of glass. The steam from the water drifted upward in delicate tendrils, rising higher than before, almost dancing. He knelt, running his fingers through the air above it. The warmth brushed his skin like silk. Beneath the surface, faint lights glimmered, subtle and shifting, as though moonlight had seeped underground and forgotten the way out. Coda appeared beside him, silent. Together they watched the mist sway in rhythm with Mae's slow breathing that drifted from the cabin window. For one brief instant, Elias felt something align, his heartbeat, the dog's. The faint pulse of the spring, all synchronized, as if time had folded in to listen. He spoke softly, to no one and everything at once. "What are you trying to tell us?" There was no answer, only the steady release of warmth. But when he turned back toward the cabin, he noticed something strange. The frost on the window pane, where Mae's silhouette rested, was melting from within, tracing lines that looked almost like veins of light. He rubbed his eyes. The pattern vanished. By dawn, Mae's breathing was stronger. When Elias offered the oxygen mask, she shook her head. "Not yet," she said. "Let me keep the air from out there a little longer." He hesitated, watching the rise and fall of her chest. The color that had returned to her cheeks hadn't faded. "You should still be careful," he murmured. "I am," she said. "I'm careful not to lose hope." Coda barked once, a low, resonant sound that carried through the fog. It wasn't alarm. It was an announcement. Elias opened the door and saw that the mist had thickened again, but this time it moved with intention. It gathered around the spring, curling upward like breath meeting breath. Mae stepped out beside him. "It's calling," she said. "To what?" "Not what," she corrected. "Who?" They stood side by side, silent witnesses as the air shimmered in soft waves. The fog thinned enough for Elias to see the ridgeline above, faint symbols carved into the rock, invisible until now. Circles interlocked, simple but deliberate, the same shape repeated again and again. "Did miners make those?" he asked. "No miner carves circles," Mae said. "They carve tunnels." He looked at her, at the way the morning light touched her hair. "So who did?" She turned her face toward the rising sun, eyes half closed. "Someone who knew the mountain wasn't just stone." Elias wanted to dismiss it, to name it superstition, but the thought wouldn't hold. Every instinct he'd trusted his entire life, physics, logic, order, was softening like ice under thaw. He crouched near the spring and placed both hands in the water. This time, the warmth wasn't passive. It pushed back, gentle but aware. He withdrew quickly, startled. Mae smiled faintly. "See? You touched it, and it touched you back." Elias stared at his wet palms. The skin looked younger, the veins less stark. He flexed his fingers. "It's just circulation," he muttered. "Maybe," Mae said. "Or maybe kindness is contagious, even from the ground up." They spent the rest of the morning tending the area, clearing debris, lining the pool with flat stones, building a low wall to shelter it. When the sun reached its peak, Mae sat again beside the spring, dipping her hands into the warmth. Her eyes were distant but peaceful. "Do you ever think," she said softly, "that places remember the people who love them?" Elias considered this. "Then this mountain remembers something better than we deserve." Coda leaned against his leg, the weight solid, grounding. Mae's gaze drifted toward the ridge. "Maybe we weren't abandoned," she said. "Maybe we were sent back," Elias didn't answer. He looked at the faint curl of steam winding its way into the air, thin, fragile, yet endless. As dusk crept in, the temperature dropped, but the warmth around the spring held. The snow at its edge glowed faintly, not from light, but from life. Elias spread a tarp near it, more out of reverence than practicality. He caught Mae's reflection in the water, softer, younger, as though the earth had lent her its patience. When night fully claimed the valley, Elias whispered into the dark, "If you're real, show me what you want." Only silence replied. And yet, somewhere deep within that silence, the earth seemed to inhale and breathe out. The air stirred, brushing across his cheek like a hand, gentle and unafraid. He turned back to the cabin where Mae waited by the fire, Coda at her feet. For the first time since arriving, Elias didn't feel lost. The mountain's breath followed him inside, wrapping around the small room like a quiet promise. They didn't speak again that night. There was nothing left to say. Outside, the spring kept breathing, steady, alive, patient, as though it had been waiting all this time for someone to listen. The thaw came quietly, almost shy, as if the mountain itself were deciding whether to trust them. By the third week, rivulets had begun to lace the valley floor, threading between roots and stones. The snow receded from the cabin steps, revealing what time had buried: scraps of old metal, shards of bottles, the skeletal remains of forgotten tools. Elias gathered the pieces into a pile near the shed, sorting them by habit. The man who'd once repaired machines for a living couldn't look at rust without seeing potential. Yet, even as he worked, something about the valley's silence unsettled him. It wasn't empty anymore. It was expectant. Mae spent her mornings by the spring. The oxygen tank had become an afterthought now. Her breath came steady, almost strong. She spoke little, but her silence was luminous. When she smiled, the lines of fatigue around her mouth seemed to dissolve into something gentler, something like faith. That morning, she called out softly, "Elias, come look at this." He set down his wrench and followed her voice. She was kneeling near the edge of the clearing, her hand brushing against a patch of earth where the last of the snow had melted. Beneath it lay a pattern, a faint but deliberate, carved into the rock itself. Circles and lines intersecting like a map drawn by someone who trusted geometry more than words. Elias crouched beside her. "You've seen this before," he said. "Yes," she whispered. "On the ridge." Same symbols. He traced one of the grooves with his thumb. The carving was old, but the edges were still clean, untouched by moss or erosion. "This isn't from the miners," he said. "It's too careful." Mae glanced toward the cabin. "Then who?" He didn't answer, though a name hovered in his mind. The initials burned into the cabin wall, E.M., 1932. That afternoon, while moving old crates in the shed, Elias found something wedged between two beams, a leather-bound notebook wrapped in oilcloth. Its spine was cracked, the cover darkened by smoke and time. He turned it over, brushing away the dust until the faint letters appeared. Elmer Moore. He carried it inside. Mae looked up from her chair, her eyes widening as he laid it on the table between them. A relative? Maybe, Elias said. Or maybe just a ghost with our name. The first pages were filled with sketches of tunnels, water lines, and pressure gauges. But as the entries continued, the handwriting grew looser, almost fevered. February 6th, 1932, the spring breathed, the wind stirred, brushing against his coat. From somewhere deep within the valley came a soft rumble, not of warning, but of acknowledgement. Coda raised his head and wagged his tail once. Elias smiled, small and tired. Guess that's an answer. When he returned inside, Mae was asleep by the fire, the journal open beside her hand. Her face was calm, illuminated by the gentle light of the flames. Elias watched her for a long moment before closing the notebook and placing it carefully on the shelf. Above them, the mountains sighed. It wasn't the groan of stone shifting or wind through cracks. It was something deeper. The slow breath of a place that had finally been remembered. And as Elias lay down beside his wife, he felt, for the first time in years, that they weren't merely surviving. They were part of something still unfolding, a story older than loss, older than even forgiveness. The next morning dawned soft and silver. Fog drifted low, clinging to the treetops. Elias woke to the smell of damp earth and the faint rhythm of water running somewhere beneath the house. The sound had changed, no longer a whisper, but a pulse with purpose. He stepped outside. The spring glowed faintly in the half-light, the water curling over itself like breath on glass. Coda was already there, sitting perfectly still, eyes fixed on something beyond the hollow. Mae followed, the leather-bound journal clutched to her chest. "He wrote about a sealed chamber," she said. "Down where the mine used to be." Elias nodded. "If the spring's fed by something deeper, that might be it." They packed a lantern, rope, and a small tool bag, following the narrow path behind the cabin. The trail curved along the ridge, passing through birch trees that creaked softly in the morning wind. Every so often, the ground beneath them gave a subtle tremor, nothing violent, more like a slow exhalation. After half an hour, they reached what remained of the old mining entrance, a sagging arch of timber half swallowed by moss and time. A rusted sign hung askew. "More mining," Kome brushed the letters with her fingertips. "He wasn't just some worker," she murmured. "He owned this place." Elias traced the grooves of the letters. And maybe it owned him. Coda nosed at the ground, then disappeared into the dark of the tunnel. Elias lit the lantern and followed, Mae close behind. The air inside was cool and damp, alive with the scent of minerals and memory. Their footsteps echoed softly, blending with the steady drip of water from the ceiling. After a short descent, the tunnel widened into a chamber. The beam of the lantern revealed a low wall of stones, stacked carefully, deliberately. Across the surface, carved in a miner's unsteady hand, were the same words from the journal. "The mountain gives back only to those who give of themselves." Mae exhaled slowly. "He built this." Elias set down the lantern, running his hand along the stones. The mortar had long since crumbled, but the structure held, as though time itself had decided to preserve the warning. "Help me clear the top," he said. They worked together, stone by stone, until a thin crack opened between two rocks. A faint current of air escaped, warm and fragrant, carrying a smell unlike anything Elias had known. Not decay, not earth, but something living, like the scent of rain before it falls. Coda leaned forward, sniffing, then gave a low, contented sound, tail wagging once. "It's alive in there," Mae whispered. "Or dangerous," Elias replied. Though his tone lacked conviction, they pried loose one more stone. The air that flowed out now was warmer, heavier. The lantern's flame trembled as if bowing to it. Elias lifted the light and peered through the gap. On the other side, the rock walls glistened with moisture, streams of mineral water tracing delicate patterns like veins of silver. In the center stood a pool, its surface luminous, its depth unfathomable. Mae's breath caught. "It's beautiful," Elias hesitated. "It's not meant to be found." "But it was found," she said. "By him." And now by us. She stepped closer, her palm resting on the stone wall. He sealed it to protect it, not to hide it. He must have known someone would come who needed it again. Elias studied her face in the lantern light. Pale, earnest, unafraid. The woman he'd once feared to lose now stood before him stronger than she had been in years. The warmth of the spring had given her back more than breath. It had given her conviction. "You think the mountain decides who needs saving?" he asked quietly. Mae smiled, eyes glistening. "Maybe kindness doesn't decide, it just waits for the right hearts to notice." He couldn't argue with that. They replaced the stones gently, sealing the gap once more. Elias pressed his hand flat against the surface, murmuring a few words that felt half prayer, half gratitude. Then they turned back, leaving the chamber as they had found it, intact, breathing. Outside, the valley had changed. The fog was rising, curling upward into ribbons of light. The snowmelt streamed in clear threads down the hillside, all converging toward the spring behind their cabin. The sound was no longer distant. It was a heartbeat. As they approached the clearing, Elias saw something he hadn't noticed before. The ground around the spring was sprouting faint green shoots, tiny, defiant leaves forcing their way through the frost. He knelt, brushing the soil gently aside. Mae joined him, wonder softening her voice. "It's too early for growth." "It's still winter." "Maybe the mountain doesn't follow our calendar," he said. Coda bounded to the edge of the pool and barked once, sharp and certain. The ripples shimmered outward in perfect circles, spreading until they reached the very stones they'd laid weeks before. Mae looked at the rings expanding, each one slower, softer than the last. "It's answering him," Elias nodded. "Maybe it remembers his voice." They stood together for a long time, watching the water settle. Above them, clouds thinned to reveal a band of pale sunlight. It fell directly on the spring, catching the steam, turning it gold. Mae leaned against him. "You said once this place would kill us," he smiled. "I was wrong. It's teaching us how to live." That evening, as dusk pressed against the windows, Elias reopened the journal. He added a final line beneath Elmer's last words, the ink still fresh when he set the pen down. April 6th, 2025. The mountain still remembers. So must we. He left the notebook open beside the fire. The pages breathing in the warm air, and somewhere deep beneath the cabin, the sealed chamber murmured in response. A slow, contented heartbeat echoing through stone. Spring had begun its patient work. The ice along the ridge cracked open into small rivers, and the sound of water had become constant, running, whispering, remembering. Raven's Hollow, as Mae had begun to call it half in jest, no longer looked abandoned. The cabin breathed again. Flowers sprouted where snow had once been thickest. The mountain was keeping its promise. Elias spent the morning repairing a section of roof that winter had loosened, pausing now and then to rest his hands against the wood and feel its warmth. Mae tended to the small garden, humming an old tune neither of them could quite recall the words to. Coda circled the property as usual, his patrol less about guarding than ensuring that all was still in harmony. By afternoon, clouds gathered along the horizon, not of rain, but of dust. A motor's hum echoed faintly through the valley, a sound so foreign it took a moment for Elias to recognize it. He lowered his hammer, frowning. "Mae," he called softly. She turned, following his gaze. A black SUV crawled up the rough mountain road, tires slipping on the thawing mud. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world they had built here had been untouched by engines, unbothered by news. The vehicle's approach felt like intrusion, or perhaps reckoning. "It can't be," Mae said quietly. "They wouldn't." But they would. The car stopped just short of the cabin, spattering the fence with mud. The doors opened in unison. First came their eldest, Daniel, city-polished, suit jacket tailored too fine for the wilderness. Behind him, Claire, his sister, ever precise, holding a leather folder as though it might shield her from the air. And lastly, Nathan, the youngest, looking out of place and uncertain, his tie already loosened. Coda's low growl broke the silence. Elias rested a hand on the dog's neck. "Easy, boy. Daniel smiled with the careful warmth of someone used to closing deals. "Dad," he said. "Mom." Mae's lips parted, but no words came. The years they had spent waiting for visits, calls, letters, anything, suddenly felt heavier than the mountain itself. "You found us," Elias said, his tone flat. Claire stepped forward. "We've been worried. You disappeared without contact, no phone, no mail." "You mean no access?" Elias corrected. Daniel laughed softly, deflecting. "We didn't come to argue. We came to see if you're all right." Mae gestured toward the garden, the cabin, the air itself. "Do we look unwell?" They hesitated. The answer was too obvious to speak. Her color, her strength, both were impossible. She should have been tethered to an oxygen tank, not kneeling in soil, hands dirty with life. "What is this place?" Nathan asked quietly. "It's like the air's different." "It is," Mae said. "It listens," Claire frowned. "Listens?" Before Elias could respond, Coda barked once and trotted toward the spring. The sound drew their attention. The shimmer of steam rising from behind the cabin. "What's that?" Daniel asked. "Water," Elias said. "Same as what you have in the city. Only it doesn't lie." Daniel exchanged a glance with Claire. "We've heard things," he began. "Locals talking about a couple living in the mountains. About water that heals, about a dog that guides people." Mae's voice was calm. "Stories are only dangerous when told by those who don't understand them." Claire opened her folder, papers glinting white in the dim light. "We've looked into the property records. This land sits on old mineral claims. The water rights alone could be—" "Stop!" Elias's voice cut through like a blade. "You came for ownership papers?" "We came for you," Daniel said. "But we can't ignore what this is. You could live comfortably. No more isolation, no more risk." Mae shook her head. "We're not in danger here." Nathan's eyes moved between them, unsettled. "You were when you left." "We all thought—" He trailed off, then finished softly. "We thought we'd never see you again." Coda approached him then, tail still, gaze steady. Nathan froze as the dog sniffed at his hand, then licked it once before turning away toward the spring. "What does that mean?" Claire asked. Mae smiled faintly. "He knows you're not lying." Elias looked at Daniel. "And he knows you are." The eldest son's composure flickered. "Dad, be reasonable." "Reason built your world," Elias said. "But mercy built ours." A silence settled over them, heavy but not cruel. Somewhere in the forest, meltwater trickled like faint applause. Daniel exhaled. "We're family. You can't just hide away forever." "We're not hiding," Mae said. "We're healing." Claire closed her folder. "Then at least let us stay a night. See what you've built. Understand it." Elias hesitated. The mountain seemed to pause with him. Finally he nodded. "The porch, not inside." As they settled uneasily on the steps, steam continued to rise behind the cabin, a constant, quiet reminder of everything that could not be contained on paper. By twilight, the mountain had wrapped itself in mist again, the last traces of sunlight scattered through the valley like gold dust caught in breath. The three children, grown, distant, almost strangers, sat on the porch, the soft creak of the boards their only conversation. Inside, Mae moved slowly, preparing tea as though nothing had changed. Elias watched her from the hearth. "You're calm," he murmured. "They need calm more than we do," she said. Coda lay near the door, head on his paws, eyes half closed but alert. Every time Daniel spoke, the dog's ears twitched. Outside, the siblings had fallen into low conversation. Claire's voice carried the sharpness of calculation. "We can't just leave them here, Daniel. There's value in this land. The geothermal data alone—" Daniel cut her off. "Don't start that again. They're our parents." Nathan's voice was quiet. "They're people who stopped belonging to our world." Inside, Elias stepped onto the porch. The boards groaned beneath his boots, the sound enough to make all three look up. He handed each of them a cup. "Tea," he said. "Nothing special, just what the mountain gives." They accepted it awkwardly. hands brushing against the warm ceramic. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Nathan broke it first. "It smells different." "What is it?" "Mint and spring root," Elias said. "Picked this morning?" Daniel took a sip, frowning. "It's clean." Elias smiled faintly. "That's what happens when water hasn't been told what it's worth." The comment hung in the air like fog. Claire looked toward the steam curling behind the cabin. "You still haven't explained that." Mae joined them then, carrying another mug for herself. "Some things can't be explained," she said. "They can only be respected." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, people in town are talking. They think you found something unnatural, some kind of geothermal pocket. There's even talk of investors." "We found kindness," Mae said simply. "That's not—" Daniel began, then stopped. Her tone was steady, unassailable. Claire's voice softened. "You sound different, Mom." "I am," Mae said. When you can breathe again, the world changes shape. The air between them thickened. Elias leaned against the railing, eyes on the valley. The first stars had begun to appear, faint as promises. "You all left because you thought we were a burden," he said quietly. "You weren't wrong." "But you never asked why we stayed behind." Daniel looked away. Nathan stared at his hands. Only Claire met his gaze. "You didn't give us a choice." "There's always a choice," Elias said. "You just didn't like the cost of mercy." Thunder murmured somewhere beyond the ridge, a long, low growl that rolled through the mountain like a warning. The mist thickened, clinging to their faces, damp and electric. Coda rose suddenly, pacing the porch. His tail was stiff, head tilted toward the forest. Mae followed his gaze. "Something's shifting," she said. Elias nodded slowly. The spring's rhythm, usually gentle and constant, had changed. The mist rising from it now pulsed in quickened intervals, as though the mountain itself were breathing faster. Nathan stood. "Is that normal?" "Nothing alive stays still forever," Mae answered. Another rumble, deeper this time, rolled underfoot. The cups rattled. Elias steadied the table, scanning the trees. The mist glowed faintly where it met the tree line, an otherworldly shimmer, neither dangerous nor safe. Daniel stepped forward. "Dad, what's happening?" "The same thing that happens when you try to take more than you understand," Elias said. Mae's eyes were fixed on the fog. "It's reminding us." A light rain began to fall, not cold, not harsh, just enough to blur the outlines of everything. The spring hissed where the drops touched its surface, releasing curls of steam that rose higher and higher. Claire whispered, "It's beautiful." "And alive," Mae said. "It knows we're all here now." Daniel turned toward her, his voice breaking between frustration and awe. "You talk like it's conscious." "It's kinder than we were," she said. The words struck like quiet thunder. No one spoke after that. They stood together, listening, to rain, to the slow shifting of stone beneath their feet, to the soft hum of the living spring. When the storm finally broke, lightning flashed across the ridge, illuminating the valley in a single breathless instant. For that moment, they all saw it, the faint outline of symbols glowing across the rocks, the same circles and lines etched into the chamber below. Nathan whispered, "It's the same mark." "Yes," Mae said. Mae nodded. "Then maybe, for once, we can let something be beyond us, and still love it." They stayed outside long after the rain stopped, their silhouettes outlined by the faint glow of the spring. The mist rose and fell in gentle rhythm again, like a heart settling after fear. When they finally went inside, Coda remained on the porch, guarding both worlds, the one of blood and the one of stone, as the mountain exhaled softly through the night. By morning, the storm had rinsed the valley clean. The air was sharper now, charged, alive. Dew clung to every leaf, every thread of grass, catching the sun in trembling prisms. The world felt awake in a way Elias hadn't seen since childhood, as if the mountain had spent the night remembering itself. He stepped outside before dawn, boots sinking into the wet earth. The spring shimmered faintly, its mist rising in long, elegant ribbons that caught the early light. Coda sat at the edge, still as a carved guardian. Elias crouched beside him, resting a hand on the dog's back. "Still breathing, huh?" he murmured. The dog didn't move, but Elias could feel it, that faint vibration under the soil. The mountain wasn't sleeping anymore. Behind him, footsteps. Claire appeared in her father's coat, her hair damp from the mist. She hesitated before speaking. "Dad," she said quietly, "I couldn't sleep." "Storm kept you up?" She shook her head. "Mom did." She was praying. Or talking. "To it." Elias looked back toward the cabin. Through the open window he could see Mae sitting at the table, the old journal open before her, her lips moving without sound. "Your mother's learned a language I never could," he said softly. Claire joined him by the spring, hugging herself. "You believe her, don't you?" Elias didn't answer immediately. "I don't believe or disbelieve, I listen. That's enough." The mist curled between them, a thin silver thread that seemed to connect their words. "You were right," she said finally, "about why we left. We were tired of giving without getting anything back." Elias turned toward her, eyes unreadable. "And what have you gotten since?" She didn't respond. Her gaze stayed on the water, where the reflection of the sun trembled like a heartbeat. "You're not angry?" "I was," Elias said, "for a long time. But anger's just love that forgot how to speak." Claire's throat tightened. She looked down, blinking hard. "I didn't come for the land," she said. "Daniel did. I just wanted to see if you were still alive." Elias smiled faintly. "I think that's what the mountain wanted, too." A door creaked behind them. Daniel emerged, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his expression determined. "Dad, we need to talk." Elias stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "Do we?" Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I stayed up reading that old journal. I know what's down there, that sealed chamber. If what it says is true, that water isn't natural, it's geothermal, maybe medicinal. Do you understand what that means?" "Yes," Elias said evenly. "It means it's not ours," Daniel exhaled sharply. "It could save lives. It could make us rich. Same thing to you?" Elias asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Don't do that. Don't make this about morality. You and Mom can stay here, but at least let someone study it." "We could destroy it," Elias interrupted. "Just like before," Daniel's eyes flashed. "Before? Your grandfather sealed that chamber because men like you tried to claim what wasn't theirs. He wrote it down, not as warning, but confession." Daniel took a step closer. "This isn't about greed. It's about legacy." Elias's voice rose, low but hard. "Legacy is what you leave untouched when you're gone." For a moment, only the spring's soft hum filled the silence between them. Mae appeared at the door then, her shawl trailing like a veil. "He's right," she said. "Legacy isn't wealth. It's memory that refuses to die." Daniel turned to her. "Mom, you could have real treatment. Real doctors. Don't you want that?" "I wanted breath," she said. "And I found it. Here." "You found illusion," Daniel said. "This place is—" Coda's sudden bark cut him off, loud, commanding, sharp enough to echo through the trees. Everyone froze. The dog stood stiff, staring toward the ridge where the mine's entrance lay hidden by fog. Elias followed the line of his gaze. The mist there was thicker, moving unnaturally, as if drawn toward something unseen. Mae's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's waking," Daniel frowned. "What is?" "The part that remembers us," Elias said. Without another word, he started toward the ridge. Coda trotted beside him, tense but focused. Mae followed, her pace slow but steady. Claire hesitated, then joined them. Daniel stayed a few steps behind, torn between skepticism and fear. As they neared the mine, the air grew heavy with warmth. Steam curled from cracks in the ground, carrying a sound, faint, rhythmic, like water striking hollow stone. The seal they had rebuilt now trembled, the stones slick with condensation. Elias knelt, pressing a hand to the wall. "It's breathing faster," he murmured. "Is that dangerous?" Claire asked. "Only if we forget to be kind." The wall shifted slightly under his palm, a subtle movement, almost imperceptible. But enough. A single stone slid free and dropped to the ground. From the opening, warm air poured out in a slow, sighing wave. The sound that followed was not thunder, not wind. It was something else. A low murmur, deep and resonant, like the voice of the earth speaking through water. Mae closed her eyes, whispering, "It's not angry. It's remembering." Daniel stumbled back, shaking his head. "This isn't real," he said, voice trembling. This can't be real, but it was. And for the first time, even Daniel couldn't deny it. The air itself seemed to shimmer, charged with quiet reverence. Elias turned to him. "You asked what legacy means." "It means knowing when to let the world heal without your hands on it." Daniel stood frozen, his face pale, reflected in the glow of the mist. The mountain's breath moved around them all, patient, ancient, and alive. The air inside the ridge had changed. It was thicker now, perfumed with wet stone and heat. The fog that poured from the broken seam pulsed in time with their own breath, as if the mountain were sinking to their rhythm. Mae stood nearest to it, her shawl fluttering gently. Her hair, silver and wild, caught the mist and shimmered faintly in the dim light. Daniel kept his distance, his rational mind warring visibly with the trembling of his hands. "It's some kind of geothermal vent," he said again, as though naming it could make it smaller. "Gases, maybe minerals. It's not alive." Elias turned to him. "Then why does it breathe?" Daniel opened his mouth but said nothing. Mae stepped forward. "When you stop fighting what you can't measure, you start hearing what's been waiting to be heard." She reached out, palm hovering inches above the opening. The air that rose was warm, gentle, like breath on skin. Her body relaxed into it, her shoulders lowering, her lungs expanding. For a heartbeat, the wrinkles around her eyes seemed to fade. Claire's voice quivered. "Mom, stop!" "It could be toxic." Mae smiled, not moving her hand. "If it were poison, I'd have died the first night I came here." Elias joined her, resting his hand over hers. Together they stood before the breathing earth, silent witnesses to something older than both faith and science. Behind them, Coda sat rigid, eyes fixed on Daniel. The dog's body was tense, not in warning, but in waiting. Daniel took an unsteady step forward, his voice rising. "You don't get it. This could change everything. If it's geothermal, there's power here." "Enough to do what?" Elias asked sharply. "Boil the kindness out of it? Sell it until it's as dead as the world you built?" Daniel's frustration broke. "You think I wanted that world? You think I wanted to become the man who left his parents behind?" "You didn't want," Elias said. "You traded wanting for winning." The words hit harder than Daniel expected. His jaw clenched, but his eyes betrayed him. Wet, tired, human. "I tried to make something better," he said. "You gave up. You always said the world didn't care. I thought I could make it care." "And did it?" Mae asked softly. Daniel looked away. The silence that followed was answer enough. The ground trembled again, not violently, but like a great heart adjusting its beat. The air shimmered, carrying a sound now unmistakable, a low, harmonic hum that resonated in their chests. It wasn't language, but it carried meaning. It was gratitude. Mae's breath. Elias nodded. "Or forgiving us." The mist thickened, curling around them in slow, luminous spirals. Within it, faint shapes appeared. Not ghosts, not visions, but impressions, like echoes of memories caught in vapor. Faces blurred into light. Hands reached without touching. The air grew brighter until it felt less like fog and more like the very essence of warmth. Daniel stumbled backward, covering his mouth. Claire stared, eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's memory," Mae said. "Everything we ever took and forgot to give back." The earth's hum deepened, and from somewhere beneath them came a soft, rising surge, a pulse of warmth so pure it drew tears without pain. The spring below the cabin must have overflowed, because streams of water now trickled through the cracks in the tunnel. Circling their feet like gentle fingers, Elias looked down at the water, clear, luminous, alive, then back at his son. "This is the mountain's choice, not ours." Daniel stared at his father, voice shaking. "And what if it wants something in return?" Mae answered without hesitation. Then it'll take only what it gave. Love. At that, Coda stood, walked forward, and lay down between them and the opening. His head rested on his paws. The mist swirled around him, denser now, glowing faintly gold. His breathing slowed, steady, peaceful. Mae knelt beside him. "No," she whispered. "Not you too." But Coda only looked up at her once, eyes clear and calm. Then he exhaled, one long, quiet breath that seemed to merge with the mountain's own. The mist pulsed once, twice, then steadied. The hum softened to a low thrum, like the last note of a song that refuses to end. When the air cleared, the heat faded. The tremor ceased. The valley went still again. Mae pressed her hands to her face, silent tears streaking her cheeks. Elias touched her shoulder, his own throat too tight to speak. Daniel crouched, reaching for the dog. But where Coda had lain, the soil was damp and steaming. As though he had simply become part of the earth itself, Claire whispered. He gave himself back, Mae nodded slowly. He always listened better than we did. The wind shifted soft and clean. The fog began to rise once more, spreading toward the valley and beyond, curling around trees, gliding through the open fields. And everywhere it touched, something stirred. Blades of grass straightening, buds forming where winter had refused to yield. Elias stood and faced his children. "Do you see now?" he asked. "It's not power. It's permission. The world will heal if we remember to let it." No one spoke. The air itself felt sacred, and silence was the only language it would accept. The sun broke through the ridge, pouring gold over the valley. The mist caught it, turning to fire without burning. Mae took Elias's hand. Claire wept quietly. Even Daniel, for the first time, bowed his head, not in defeat, but in reverence. As they walked back to the cabin, the water from the spring followed them, winding through the grass in narrow, shimmering veins. The mountain was no longer hiding its gift. It had chosen its keepers. Behind them, from the place where Coda had lain, a single sprout pushed through the soil, small, defiant, and impossibly green. By dawn, the mountain had fallen silent again, but it was no longer the silence of emptiness. It was the hush of completion, of something vast exhaling after centuries of waiting. The air smelled clean. Not new, not foreign, simply right. Mae sat by the window, watching the valley breathe. The light shifted across her face, soft and gold, and for a moment Elias saw her as she had been decades ago, young, fierce, eyes lit by impossible hope. "Do you hear it?" she asked, her voice barely more than air. "I hear everything," he said, "even the parts I can't explain." Outside, the spring still shimmered, though its glow had dimmed to something gentle, like the last ember in a dying hearth. The earth had accepted its gift and gone quiet, not spent, but settled. Coda's resting place had already begun to change, grass bending toward it, small flowers pressing through the soil. Mae smiled faintly. "He's still guarding us," Elias nodded. "He always will." The door creaked open behind them. Daniel entered quietly, no longer dressed like a man with meetings to attend. His jacket was gone. Sleeves rolled, eyes softer. "I buried the tools," he said. "Didn't seem right to leave them out." Elias studied him. There was something different now, less steel, more soil. "The land doesn't need to be fixed," he said. Daniel met his father's gaze. "I know. I just needed to stop trying." Mae reached for his hand. He hesitated only a moment before taking it. The gesture was small, but it bridged decades. Claire came next, carrying the journal. She'd been copying Elmer Moore's words into a new notebook, each line written in the careful script of someone translating not language, but reverence. "I think people should know," she said. "But not through science or stories. Through what they see when they come here. No signs." "No fences," Elias said. "No," Claire agreed. "Just silence." "That'll be enough." Nathan lingered near the door, his camera slung loosely around his neck. He had taken hundreds of photos over the past few days, mist curling over rocks, Mae's hand over the spring, Daniel standing in the light like a man waking from a long dream. "You think anyone will believe it?" he asked. They don't have to, Mae said. The truth doesn't vanish just because people doubt it. Outside, a breeze rose from the valley, curling through the open door, cool and clean. It carried with it the faint scent of pine and something sweeter, the living memory of water. The sound of it moved through the cabin like a song only the walls remembered how to hold. Elias stood and stepped outside. The sunlight had turned the valley into a mirror of gold. He could see where the new stream had carved its path through the grass, winding gently toward the forest below. At its edge, the small sprout from Coda's resting place had already grown, a young sapling, its leaves trembling, reflecting light like silver. He called softly for Mae. She came to his side, leaning against him. He found a way to stay, she said. Elias nodded. He found the only way that matters. Behind them, the children watched in silence. No one spoke because words would have less weight than breath. Mae's strength faltered then, just slightly. Elias felt it in the way her hand pressed into his arm. She smiled as though she already knew what he was thinking. It's all right, she said. I've been borrowing time. Now it's giving me back what I gave. He turned to her sharply. Don't say that. I have to, she whispered. It's part of the promise. The mountain heals what it can and keeps what it must. The sun climbed higher. The mist thinned. Mae stepped toward the spring while she reached for his hand. You came back, she said. That's all I ever needed. Her eyes drifted closed. One breath, then another. Outside, the wind paused as if listening, and then, as the first bird called from the trees, Mae's chest stilled. The mountain exhaled once more. The silence that followed was not grief. It was gratitude. Elias bowed his head, pressing his forehead to her hand. The warmth there lingered longer than it should have, as though the mountain refused to let her go completely. Hours later, when the valley dimmed again, the family sat together by the spring. The air was calm, the water clear. Above them, the stars had gathered directly overhead, reflecting perfectly on the surface. Daniel spoke quietly. What now? Elias looked at the reflection of the stars trembling in the water. Now, he said, we listen. They stayed until dawn. When the first light touched the sapling by Coda's grave, the leaves turned gold for an instant. And beneath that glow, the water hummed softly, steady, eternal, alive. The mountain was breathing still. Long before they came, I was only stone, cold, patient, enduring. I watched men carve their hunger into my ribs, take from my heart and call it progress. When they left, I stayed, keeping what they had forgotten, the warmth that does not burn, the mercy that does not fade. For decades I waited, quiet under the weight of snow and silence. Roots threaded through my veins, water whispered through my bones. The earth remembers every kindness, even the smallest one. That is how I knew them when they returned, the woman whose breath trembled like my springs, the man whose hands still knew how to mend. They did not come to take. They came to listen. When they knelt at my wound and called it a gift, I answered. I gave them air that healed and water that remembered their names. In their gentleness I found my own. Through their silence I spoke again. Now she rests within me, her breath folded into mine. The dog keeps watch beneath the grass, loyal even in becoming earth. The children walk lighter now, their hearts slower, their voices quiet enough to hear what lies beneath noise, the pulse that binds them to all that lives and dies. They call me mountain. But I am no monument. I am breath turned to stone, kindness fossilized into patience. I am what waits beneath every act of forgetting. When the wind moves through the valley, it carries her voice still, soft, unhurried, certain. Be kind, and the earth will answer, and so I do. Every dawn, every thaw, every heartbeat that dares to listen, the mountain is breathing still.